Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Radio Works World. And I am the vision host, Marion Bevington. And I want to share some information that affects all of us, including me, very frequently. So you've heard the phrase, someone pushes your button. Yeah, so when someone pushes your button, or buttons, maybe you've got more than one, I think most of us have. What is it that you actually believe is happening? When we feel insulted, when we feel disrespected, when we feel injured, wounded, angered, enraged by the action of something or someone else, then our button has been pressed. So that button might bring out rage, it might bring out jealousy, there are so many very powerful emotions that can get stimulated when someone pushes your buttons. And very often, the more buttons we have, or the bigger they are, then the more sensitive we are perceived to be. And what I would like to talk today about are those buttons, because firstly, that what they do for us is they hold us as victims. They make us believe that something outside of ourselves is controlling ourselves. That's what they make you believe. They make you believe that there is something outside of you, something that happens or something that is said or done outside of you that is controlling you, controlling your state, controlling the very way that you are being. And those buttons are actually something that we can change. Yes, you heard it right. You can change your buttons. And when you change the button, you can also change the response or reaction that sits behind that button. The very first step in this process is to recognize those buttons are yours. For me to recognize that the buttons are mine. This must be the first step in the process if we want to change anything. One of the ways that I describe myself to people is that I say that I used to program computers. I was very technical. And now I help to deprogram people, which is actually also very technical. But what do I mean when I say deprogram people? Well, the programs, or the apps, if you like, more people now are familiar with an app, you know, the app on your phone or on your computer. These apps, these programs, they are the buttons. So you know yourself, you've got your smartphone. When you press the app, what happens? A specific mechanism begins to play out. And that's exactly what happens when I press your button. So that button could have a positive influence on you. It could make you feel special and important. Or if somebody presses that other side of that button, it means that you then feel less than, or you feel wounded, or you feel abandoned, or you feel isolated in some way, or belittled. So these buttons can play out in many different ways. We have positive apps or buttons, we have negative ones too. And looking at what they are, so these are their mechanisms. So in the mind, what they do, and in the body, what they do, is they stimulate specific mechanisms. Now, those mechanisms in the body and the mind are different emotions. They are different states and moods. And those emotions and states and moods also have feelings with them. They have thoughts with them. Sometimes they have words with them. So these programs, these apps, these buttons that we all have, where do they come from? Well, I'm going to focus on the ones that do us the least amount of good, the ones that stimulate the most amount of stress in the body, because when stress is stimulated in the body, that will negate our immune system. It can affect your health in very serious ways. I mean, we all know that the majority of illness and disease is caused by stress, right? We know that. And so let's look at the stressful buttons, the ones that create that negative impact, because I believe if we can begin to work at this level and start to help to heal and resolve those buttons, we're going to upgrade our health a little. And the more that we continue to upgrade our health, the closer we get to real healing or wholeness, which is at the root of the word health or heal, is to be whole. So how can we regain our wholeness? So the buttons that get pressed when, so I'm going to use myself as an example. Now, I often feel, one of my biggest buttons is to drop into a feeling of not safe. And it can happen to me when I feel attacked. And I can feel attacked when I hear an opinion that is different to mine. It can be such a subtle, small piece of information that I receive, that somebody doesn't agree with me, or somebody has a very different opinion, which means that it makes my opinion look not valuable in some way. Even just to that one person, they might not value it. There's a subtle level of attack that I feel from that. And in that moment of feeling attacked, I have this app, this program, this mechanism that drives me to a place where I don't feel safe. It's almost as if my life is at risk. So where did this all come from? I used to run away from this problem. I am an intrepid traveler. I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in many different cultures and many different countries. And what I've come to learn as my experience is that we are more the same than we are different, and that there are many more beautiful, good people than there are bad. Many, many, many magnitudes of more good than there is bad in this world. And yet, even though my logical, rational brain knows most people are really, really good, I very rarely get myself into any situation that I need to feel frightened of. In fact, as an adult, I don't believe I've ever really been in a situation that I need to feel frightened in. And yet fear is like this automatic response that happens. This fear that something's going wrong, this fear that I'm in danger, this fear that this attack is going to lead to something that is going to impact me negatively. And it never happens. So the button, the program, the app of feeling attacked, to me, began in childhood. Now, it also, I know, comes through the ancestral lines, because parents, their parents, their parents, their parents. I know a lot of my family background, and I understand now where this sense of being a victim comes from. Because if I'm feeling attacked, then it means something is oppressing or attacking me, which puts me into this position of victim. And as a victim, I drop into the fight or flight response, which takes me out of my rational mind. When we go into fight or flight, it creates adrenaline in the body. Fear creates adrenaline in the body, and the adrenaline and the cortisol, these are two chemicals that help the body to survive when it's in danger. And so you've heard of the fight or flight or freeze mechanisms. So these are the three possibilities that happen when my body believes it's in danger. Now, my body believes it's in danger when it receives information from my mind that's had a little program, this mechanism, this program, this app has been stimulated. So I hear that somebody disagrees with something I'm doing, and instantly my whole body goes, oh my God, I need to run away, or I need to fight, or I need to play dead and freeze for a moment, so that whatever's so scary will pass by and think I'm dead and it won't pay any attention to me. And so when I'm in one of those three states, the fight, fright, or freeze, what I don't need to do is I don't need to be very clever. I don't need to remember my 18 times table. I don't need to remember all of the flags of the world. I don't need to remember the height of Mount Everest. I don't think I've ever really known that anyway. But I don't need all this knowledge and information that I've gained over the years, even though some of it may be real genius, real wisdom. I don't need that right now. I need all of the energy of my being to protect me, to keep me safe, to help me to run away, to help me to play as dead as possible. And in that mechanism in my body, I'm basically disconnecting so much of my own brilliance, so much of my own wisdom. And I'm in a place where I'm like a small child and I'm running, you know, when you play games in the playground and somebody's chasing you and you've just got to get away, or playing with your parents or your uncles or your brothers or your aunties or somebody. And there's like, oh, you've just got to scream and you've got to get away. That's basically the place that my body is in when I'm in fight or flight or freeze. Now, in this place, what can also happen is that we can, because we have different programs, different apps that run depending on who pressed the button, what button they pressed, what caused that button, what's behind it all, and what coping strategies have I learned in the past to help to deal with that button. And often these buttons are, well, always, these buttons are wounds. They are things that have been stimulated through a trauma or a shock. And that trauma or that shock I have had, or my parents had and they taught me the response, or their parents had it and it's been passed along the chain. And people who believe in past lives, it's the type of information that is said to be passed along with your spirit as you journey through different lives. But whatever mechanism, what I do know is the root of these buttons is a trauma, is a shock that happened. And in that moment of shock, it was unexpected. And I had no strategy to deal with it, or the person who received the shock had no strategy to deal with it. So there was no intelligent understanding and resources on hand in that moment to be able to cope and deal with the shock. And so what happens is there is a mechanism created in that moment of how to deal with it. And often that mechanism is in the place of that scared kid in the playground. Ah! So it's really irrational and it's highly emotional, and it can be almost volcanic sometimes. You know, the fight energy it's so irrational. I mean, if you've ever been really scared or you've ever been in a fight, I'm quite fortunate. I've never actually been in a physical fight. Well, I used to do judo, but that was not quite the same. So these mechanisms that happen when the button has been pushed, they stop us from being mature. They stop us from being rational. They stop us from being compassionate. They stop us from empathizing, from sympathizing. And actually, whenever somebody insults or is disrespectful, even when I do it, if I insult somebody or I'm being disrespectful or I'm putting somebody down, it's because I've been triggered. I've had a button pushed, and that button has taken me to this coping strategy. And as I said, that coping strategy, it's not mature, it's not compassionate, it's not empathetic, it's not intelligent, and it's not emotionally intelligent. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's emotionally unintelligent, because usually these strategies and these devices, these mechanisms, are things that we developed in childhood. So if a button was developed when I was 4 years of age, if I had a trauma or a shock of some kind, okay, I've got a great story about a client of one of my teachers. She started having panic attacks when she was going past shoe shops. Now, I know all the ladies listening will understand what that means, but actually this is a different kind of story. So she'd have a panic attack when she walked past shoe shops, and she didn't understand what was going on. And as a result of working with one of my teachers, what they discovered was her father had been a sergeant or somebody in one of the forces, one of the military forces. And this guy always had very, very shiny shoes, because if you're in the military, they think shiny shoes are really important, don't they? So he always had very shiny shoes. And when he was telling her off, which he did quite a lot because it was his job, he was a sergeant, his job was to tell people off, and he expected you to look down at the floor in front of him when he told you off, because if you looked at him while he was telling you off, he thought that that was a sign of disrespect, that you must lower your eyes while you received his punishment or whatever it was he was dishing out to you. So his young daughter, who was constantly being told off and punished by the sergeant father, had to look down, and guess what she was looking at every time she was being punished? She was being made to feel bad. She was being made to feel less than. She was feeling that she was a bad child, that she was doing something wrong. She was being made to look at black, shiny shoes. And as an adult, she'd totally forgotten this that had happened to her. And she started to have panic attacks, serious, really serious, debilitating panic attacks every time she walked past a shoe shop. Because even though consciously she didn't remember, unconsciously and in the body, there was this memory that looking at shiny shoes meant that you are worthless, that you shouldn't be here, that you should think of better ways to be, that there's something wrong with you. So she was constantly being triggered into that state. That button was being pushed when she walked past a shoe shop. So fascinating where these buttons are born. And even more fascinating as these buttons grow, the effect that they can have. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been feeling sad or lonely or worried or insulted or angry or resentful, or you've been feeling a way that's very uncomfortable, and you find yourself behaving in a way that you know is really unacceptable? If somebody else did that behavior, you would be very, very disappointed in that person. And so imagine how it feels when we behave in a way that we condone, and we behave in a way that we believe is not good enough. Then that puts us into this huge conflict, because on one hand, I always want to try and be the best person that I am, and I believe that I'm always doing the best given the resources that I have access to in every moment. Unfortunately, when I'm in a state of fight or flight or freeze, when I've had a big button pushed, the resources that I have access to are those of a young child, the young child that I was. And I was brought up in a house that had lots of violence. The violence was physically on me and my brothers, and there was a lot of alcoholism, and the alcoholism and the violence went hand in hand. And I lived with that every day as a child. So I know I've received many traumas and many shocks, and I have many buttons. And my choice today, when I'm in this rational place where I am right now, and nobody's pushed any of my buttons at the moment, I'm in a place where I feel that I can be very considerate of everything around me right now. I mean, who's to say if a button gets pushed in a moment, that might change. But in this moment, I feel that I am in a place where I am resourceful, where I have access to compassion and empathy for myself and for others. This is the place where I have made a conscious decision, because bringing consciousness into our lives, that's for me is the key to all healing, to all growing, to all maturity, to gaining all of our wisdom. It comes through understanding a bit more about our own consciousness. Consciousness is one of those things that there are so many parts of it that we don't understand. That we know it's true, we know it's there, and yet it's so difficult to grasp, it's so difficult to talk about, so difficult to conceive of. But when we start to channel that consciousness consciously in a way that we perceive is mature, is intelligent, is resourceful, is compassionate, is empathetic, that's when I believe that we really are growing, that we really are doing the best that we can. And for me, once I understood that all of the issues that I believed were being dumped on me as the victim, once I understood I was allowing myself to be a victim, then I understood that the only way for me to begin to become whole again, because it's like I've been fragmented by this victimhood. The only way for me to gather up all of the parts of myself and bring them in is to learn how to love each one of them, even if I see it as completely unacceptable. So the times in my life when I've lied, the times in my life when I've harmed another person, when I've consciously been horrible because I feel wounded, the times in my life when I've done something that I perceive, if somebody else did it, I would see it as totally unacceptable. I'm learning how to love all of those parts of myself, learning how to love and accept all parts of myself, all the shadow parts, all the dark parts, all the light parts, all the loving parts, all the wise parts, all the stupid parts, whatever label is put on those parts of me. I want to bring them all to my conscious awareness to accept that I am all of these things. And unless I begin to accept and become aware of all of those things, there is absolutely no chance of any healing. When I'm a victim, I know I want to feel loved. There's a part of me that feels I deserve better than this. But what I do know in my intelligent wisdom, the rational parts of me and parts of the communities that I choose to be with, is actually the word deserve needs to be taken out of our language. It's a program all of its own. It's an app all of its own. And if I integrate that app into any part of my life, then actually I'm doing myself a disservice. Because what does deserve actually mean? It usually means that it's something that I don't have, or something that I question why I have it, or it doesn't feel natural to be a part of me. So the word itself, deserve, the more I look into it and the more I explore it, the more toxic it becomes, because it's not about deserving. Life is about seeing what is and then taking the next step. And that next step, it can serve me and it can serve everybody and everything around me. And on a spiritual level, we often don't know what the best possibilities are. They are outside of our knowledge. They are outside of our awareness. Sometimes they're even outside of our imagination. And so trusting is a huge, for me, lesson. Trusting is something that I never really understood. And so rather than this idea of deserving, which means that you identify something that you're lacking or something that you want to feel worthy of, it's so deserving and worthiness, they're concepts that are not needed. Life is as it is. I am the creator of my reality. I am the creator of everything that I experience. I create it in every moment. Understanding that and allowing everything that I've ever been, everything that I ever will be, and everything that I am right now, whether that's judged as good, as bad, or indifferent, allowing and accepting and loving all of those things. To me, that's where I become a whole person. That's where I become healed. And I know that the more healing I undertake and the more healing I embrace and experience, then the impact it has on others is always lifting, it's always uplifting too. So my journey is to continue to recognize I am the creator of my reality. Everything that happens around me is a mirror of some aspect of me that needs light shining on it, that needs me to see it, to accept it, to love it, to embrace it, to give it compassion, to give it empathy, but most of all, to give it love. And underneath the foundation of all of this is trust. Because without trust, I don't know how I could even get close to loving, especially the parts of me that I used to label as bad or negative or problematic. So so I want to invite Marina back on, because she stimulated this conversation today by being curious about my response to certain things. And although I do feel that there are lots of problems, I know, I trust underneath that a problem, the definition of a problem is I'm not accepting something that reality is showing me. So Marina, welcome back.
Wow, Dr. Marion Bevington, I take notes, I learn from you, and I know you are helping my clients, you are helping members of my family to move on with their lives, to reach out for the best in themselves and bring back into the world a better person. And that journey on its own is to be understood by psychologists, because they go and they learn about um, their mentors, their teachers, and yet they never learn about themselves. So by the time they become psychologists, academics themselves, they focus more on the negative side of life than on the positive of their knowledge.
Yes.
It's almost like because of how much they learn about other people and how little they manage to understand about themselves, they have these shortcomings. It's almost like an illness, because they feel like they are less than they were when they started the journey, or the whole purpose of um, embarking on a new dimension, into new knowledge, into a new topic, is to be empowered, to feel empowered. And that is only possible when you learn about yourself, when you use the knowledge you are acquiring from eminent people and your teachers, authors, um, to use that to build yourself up. And some people choose to build themselves down, going underground and feeling that they're not even as they were before, they are less than they were before when they started the journey. So I think that doesn't help them in any way. And I think it's something wrong with the whole educational system.
Yes. It's very
Because
true. I started in the same position, Marina. I trained to teach yoga, and one of the reasons I wanted to teach yoga was because I perceived that I was quite a good student. I was good at practicing, and I would often help the students around me in the room. And sometimes the teacher at the front of the class, I would judge that they'd either made a mistake or that they weren't teaching something correctly. And so I undertook this task of learning how to teach yoga because I wanted to prove that other people were doing it wrong. And now I get that that is, although it was a great motivation for me because it took me into a place that I now really am happy I did the teaching and the training, I now understand that my wanting to highlight other people's what I saw as problems in other people was me actually avoiding and running away from my own problems. So I was trying to point the finger and say, look, this person's a bad teacher. Look, this person isn't doing it right, because I felt like people were pointing the finger at me and I didn't want them to point the finger at me. And I didn't want to feel how it feels when people point at me and say I'm
but
doing it wrong.
actually, there's nothing wrong with pointing the finger at somebody, because if you point the finger at somebody and talk about um, his potential, his virtues, his talents, his aspirations, then that's a psychological health practice.
Yes.
So psychologically, you are building that person up, and it's about edification. I think that the main role of a psychologist should not be to go into the dark side and make you feel in a dark place, but take you places where you could see yourself, you could see what's next, you could see how much you are possible, and that brings you into a place where you could bring your own light. because otherwise you are burying alive another amazing human being, which is who is ready to give, but they don't even know they have something to give
Yeah.
unless you bring them to a place from where they could see themselves. So I think there is a fine line between being a psychologist and a coach, because a psychologist is going to go into your past and is going to um, try to help you heal all these wounds, and um, psychologist is there to guide you the same way a coach is not in your life to make you better, is in your life to guide you to become better, to empower you, because while the psychologist is dealing with your past and with the wounds that were putting the brakes into your progress, into becoming a better person, the coach is the one guiding you to create your vision. And while creating the vision, you have to be healed. So this is why a lot of academics don't understand the need for healthy psychological practices.
Mhm.
So they think their only job is to analyze this, analyze that, where in fact is about empowering people,
Yeah.
healing, helping them heal themselves and moving on and becoming the person they are designed to be. But you see, I said this lately couple of times. I don't know. It's almost like synchronicity. It's working in a very powerful way. So I think life is not about what you receive in life or you don't receive. I think life and being becoming yourself, there are two dimensions of your own possibilities. To start with, it's important what you do about what you receive and what you do about what you don't receive in your life. And then, of course, it's very important to acknowledge that you are more, and nobody can make you more. You have to make that decision for yourself, to take that journey into your own mind and understand that doesn't matter how much you for tuition or for coaching, ultimately it's you that is going to make that breakthrough. You are born alone and you die alone, but you live alone with your own vision. And
Mm.
unless you get that clarity, it's very, very difficult for anyone to help you beyond that point. So I understand from my own life, from my own um, mistakes, that
Experiences.
is mistakes. I those experiences happened not to me, happened for me, and unless I learn something, the same uh, it's possible that I will attract the same in a future. So
Yes.
being in a place of clarity, and this is why I'm so grateful to you, Dr. Marion Bevington, because you help people, including myself, to get that clarity, to see, to almost take myself out from myself and step couple of meters away from myself, ahead of myself, and see what is possible. And that's very, very important, because it's that chance I have to see myself the way I could become and work towards. It is somebody, I read this many times. It's almost like happiness. It's nothing to do with the outside world.
Yeah.
It is inside. So all the work you have to do on yourself before you start working with others are mandatory. You cannot start working with other people before you work on yourself, unless you feel free after all the knowledge you accumulated from other people, and you use that to your own advantage, to your own unfair advantage. You cannot move on. So there are people who they absorb like a sponge a lot of information, but it's very superficial because inside there is work to be done. And I feel sad when people point the finger at others,
Yeah.
saying bad things or making assumptions
Yes.
without knowing.
Yes.
Were they there to contribute um, to your life in any way, to your vision? Were they there to help you in any way to deliver yourself, the better version of yourself? So that's the question I would ask. And it's also that in the last couple of years, I helped a couple of world-class athletes to write their books. And listening to them, I understood that you see, you are an athlete. You go on the track field, and you work really, really hard. But you cannot become a champion only through working hard. You can work hard, double than others, 3 times more, and yet you'll never become a champion. Simply because there is one lesson you have to learn before becoming a champion, and that is that you can't compete against others. You could only compete against your own limitations. And
Yes.
once you understand that, you could um, go on that podium, you become a true champion. And the same applies in our lives, even if you are not an athlete. Unless you understand that you could only compete against your own limitation, you'll never champion your own life. You'll never feel like um, you are a triumph. You'll never feel you are the victory of your life. You'll never become the champion of your own life. And that's against all your hard efforts and sacrifices. And of course, it's very, that I think frustration is an understatement that makes you point the finger. And um, in fact, you are showing once more that you never went deeper inside your own reality to to work on it and build yourself up. You've always been on a very superficial level, trying to pretend you could be somebody else. And there is no need for you to be somebody else because you are the one and only, and nobody is like you. Nobody could ever be you.
Absolutely. The rewards that we gain when we're trying to prove ourselves not a victim, they're very fragile, because until we can transform the feeling of victim into I am good enough, I am who I am the stardust that I am the unique me who is not the same as anybody else. And I love myself and I love all parts of myself. Only when we reach that level do the other superficial labels that we have stop being so fragile. Because when a superficial label is put upon us that helps to give us a false sense of importance, then it is very easy to break.
Wow. Dr. Marion Bevington, thank you for sharing with us, with the rest of us, your unique stardust. From both of us, until next time, share your stardust.
Goodbye and thank you.